The shadow within. In the heart of the sprawling metropolis, hidden behind the facade of a normal life, John wrestled with an unseen enemy that threatened to consume him whole. The monster he battled was not of flesh and blood, but an insidious presence that lurked in the corners of his mind, draining the color from his world and replacing it with a suffocating darkness. This was the shadow, a formless, creeping entity that fed on his despair and whispered lies into his ears. The first time John truly felt the shadow's presence was during his college years. He had always been a high achiever, someone who thrived on challenges and basked in the glow of accomplishment. But one day, the light within him dimmed. It started subtly, with a persistent fatigue that no amount of sleep could cure, and a disinterest in activities that once brought him joy. As days turned into weeks, the shadow grew bolder, wrapping its tendrils around his thoughts and warping his perception of reality. One particularly bleak afternoon, John sat in his apartment, staring blankly at the piles of unfinished assignments. The room was dim, not because of the lack of light, but because the shadow seemed to absorb any brightness that tried to penetrate. It whispered to him, insidious and relentless, convincing him of his worthlessness and futility.
Why bother?
Why bother? It would say. You're not good enough. You'll never be good enough. These thoughts, though they sounded like his own, were laced with the shadow's venom. In John's mind's eye, the shadow was a tall, lanky figure cloaked in darkness, with eyes that glowed a sickly yellow. Its form was ever-changing, shifting like smoke, but always present, always watching. It thrived on his isolation, growing stronger with each moment he spent alone. The more he tried to fight it, the tighter its grip became. He lost count of the days spent in bed, curtains drawn, avoiding the world outside. The shadow had turned his sanctuary into a prison. One night, John awoke with a start, drenched in a cold sweat. The room was pitch black, but he could feel the shadow's presence looming over him. It was so close he could almost feel its icy breath on his skin. "You're a burden," it hissed, its voice a chilling whisper that echoed through the silence. "Everyone would be better off without you." The words cut deeper than any physical wound, leaving John gasping for breath as the weight of the darkness pressed down on him. The next morning, John tried to shake off the nightmare, but the shadow followed him like a malevolent specter. It was there in the corners of his vision, a flicker of darkness that tainted everything he saw. It murmured to him as he walked through the city, its voice a constant, insidious presence in his mind. "You're a failure," it would say. "No one cares about you. No one ever will." The words sapped his strength, leaving him feeling hollow and numb. As the days turned into weeks, the shadow's grip tightened. John's world grew darker, the colors fading until everything seemed shrouded in a perpetual twilight. The shadow thrived in this darkness, its form becoming more defined and solid with each passing day. Its eyes glowed with a malevolent light, and its tendrils wrapped around John's mind, squeezing tighter and tighter. One night, during the depths of his despair, John had a vivid dream. He was standing in a vast, barren landscape, the sky a swirling mass of gray clouds. In the distance, he saw the shadow, larger and more menacing than ever. It approached slowly, its eyes piercing through the gloom, and he felt an overwhelming urge to flee. But his legs were rooted to the spot, immobilized by fear and hopelessness. As the shadow loomed over him, it extended a skeletal hand, reaching for his heart. In that moment, something within John stirred. A faint, flickering light, barely visible, but undeniably present. He focused on that light, willing it to grow, to push back against the shadows' encroaching darkness. "You are not real," he whispered, his voice trembling but determined. "You do not control me." The shadow recoiled slightly, its form wavering. The light within John grew stronger, fueled by a newfound resolve. He repeated the words, louder and more assertively, and with each utterance, the shadow seemed to shrink. The barren landscape around him began to change, tiny patches of green emerging from the desolation. It was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. When John woke, the weight of the shadow was still there, but something had shifted. He realized that acknowledging its presence was the first step towards regaining control. He reached out to a therapist, a beacon of support in his darkest hours. Through countless sessions, he learned to challenge the shadow's lies and to reconnect with the things that once brought him joy. But the battle was far from over. The shadow, now weakened, lingered in the periphery of his vision, waiting for moments of vulnerability to strike. Each time John felt a glimmer of hope, the shadow was there, a constant reminder of the darkness that lurked just beneath the surface. The light within him flickered, sometimes strong, sometimes barely more than an ember. Years passed, and the struggle continued. John's life became a series of ups and downs, with moments of clarity followed by overwhelming darkness. The shadow, though never fully vanquished, remained a looming presence, its whispers a constant undertone in his thoughts. And as time went on, the weight of the endless battle began to take its toll. One particularly cold winter night, John sat alone in his dimly lit apartment, the weight of the shadow pressing down on him like never before. The whispers had grown louder, more insistent, drowning out any semblance of hope. Exhausted and defeated, John felt the last of his strength slipping away. In that final moment, the shadow enveloped him completely, its cold tendrils wrapping around his soul. The light within him flickered once more before being snuffed out, leaving only darkness. John's struggle had come to an end, but not with the victory he had hoped for. The shadow had claimed another victim, its hunger for despair and hopelessness insatiable. And in the silence of his apartment, the darkness reigned supreme. If you're struggling with depression, reach out. You're not alone in this darkness. Thank you for watching. Please give us a thumbs up, subscribe, and smash the bell icon for more.